As the child of a diplomat, being born in Sudan, a German mother, an Iraqi father, there's always been a negotiation with space, with time. Each place is a new negotiation. So I mean, that sort of expeditionary nature of trying to comprehend where one is and to find one's way. I spent many years in a state of unhappiness, real unhappiness. I wouldn't go to school, I would just nothing, I refused. I actually rejected Iraq when I first came. But going into art and into the Institute of Fine Arts was the beginning of sort of a revelation of where I was, because we had friends, students, colleagues from all over the country, and I started traveling with them. And in 1977, I had the privilege of being selected by Tor Heyerdahl to join the Tigris-Reed boat expedition, retracing ancient trade routes across the Indian Ocean.
Rashad! Welcome back!
It's a reed boat, and out at sea, one of the things, there's something corporal, in it, in that, when you're standing on the boat, you actually feel physically the waves and the movement of the waves. You're on a flexible, a tensile body, but also it's slow. So you have the time to experience the surface of the water, wave within wave, and the amount of life that lives on the surface of it. So when I was diving and swimming underneath, you could see that the boat itself had turned into a garden. So you had a complete ecosystem from the worms and the grass and the green on the boat, and that was one of the most inspiring sort of experiences. The end of the 90s, I was thinking about the Ark, but not so much the Ark. I began with the idea of a self-sustaining island. You could make a whole life system around you. So if you made an organic garden, you could actually create your own ecosystem.
Scorching summer heat and drought have worsened conditions for farmers and livestock herders in Iraq, a country already scarred by war and violence. With its farmlands drying up, livestock dying, Iraq is struggling with a host of environmental challenges.
Iraq is like Venice. There are points that are at the front line of climate change.
Venice is literally drowning and the water is rising.
And we're talking about a situation where we are destroying the means of surviving that. Iraq, and it's only 33-meter rise, from the sea to Baghdad, over 600 kilometers. What are you going to do when the water rises and millions, and this is already happening in places, Myanmar and Bangladesh and these areas, these are flat lands with millions of people,
Fire.
Now I'm an adult in a spaceship looking down to a beautiful, beautiful Earth.
Instead of finding the solutions, you have basically two modalities. Get as much surplus money so that you can get the fuck out, and go into space, or wipe out everybody else so that you're the only ones left. The stink of the death will be enough to kill anybody else. So I mean, we're in a serious situation that we have to reconsider the mythologies that are driving this shit, and get to a point where we actually see that we have the knowledge, we have the place, we could do something alternative in the same way that you can reinterpret the Ark.
One of the biblical stories that I loved as a child was Noah's Ark. But later, as I grew up, I began to wonder how one boat with one man was going to save every species on Earth. As we've been through this torment of the last few months, I think we've all learned one thing, is that whatever we need to overcome together as a global community.
The first mention of the Ark is in the Gilgamesh. And this writing down is 5,000 years at least from the event. And between that writing and us is 5,000 years. And in the 5,000 years from that writing to us, the Akkadians took it from the Sumerians, then the Babylonians took it, and then the Jews took it, and the Christians took it, and each one is interpreting it in their own reality. What I like about the project, and what I'm interested about, is to get away from mythology, get away from the written sort of Chinese whispers of time and the identification of it according only to your own identity. So like the Western, Ark is 17th century cog.
If an art had been built at the time, it would have been built with the material and the techniques of its time and place.
In a crisis, and people would use what they have.
So that opened up to exploring what material was used. The marshes were probably the source of civilization. Abraham is said to have built a reed hut, and in the story of the flood, in the Gilgamesh, or one of the gods that sort of tells that human beings are going to be eradicated, he speaks of turning the reed hut into an ark. This tradition of boats and the use of reeds in making the boats, the use of organic material, Iraq is very poor in wood. But people who make their boats will have to make it from the material around, and it was reeds. But all these boats, up until the 70s, existed. But they've disappeared, and this is the very first time they've disappeared in Iraq.
Since 2016, what we've been doing is searching for the original makers, and if they are still alive, working with them to recreate these boats and bring young people to connect with this heritage, and to reestablish that conversation with the rivers and waterways and with ecology around them.
A lot of times people look at cultural heritage and what they think about is archaeology. The idea to the reliquary, and that we have to preserve it and keep it. So because of that, everything was focused on the center, on the temple, where the other people had what they considered holy, the power. But of course, the palace is a place where you gather the material richness, where you understand that history. But you don't understand necessarily the periphery that kept the center alive, that built it. Not only that, but that has continued living the way it was living when that was built and destroyed, and it continued living, and then another one was built and destroyed, and it continued living because it's living with the nature. So you can literally go to places in the world where they're still alive, they're still working, but now they're dying.
My opinion, the boat belongs to the environment. So
yes,
if you have
precise.
the same environment, more or less you find the same solution.
These are some of the small boats that I made.
And I am sure in Venice it was the same.
I believe so.
So we have not remains because the reeds disappear.
Precisely.
I am sure this is the first Venice. Reeds and a boat like that. Venice was born in a small motte, we call motte, and we built some houses with the reeds, the only material we find in the lagoon.
There's an alphabet, a universal alphabet of making. All these sort of basic human capacity, technical, agriculture, it wasn't invented in Mesopotamia, it was all over the world, These are all natural extensions of our minds, the inspiration of nature, So there's a universal language of making, but that is engaged with a real environment, There's been a breakage with the urban, with the wars, a loss of the vernacular knowledge of how you actually survive in nature, alone.
In the time of the ancient flood, as in any catastrophe, survival depends on cooperation. It's the same now. We need global conversations about vernacular knowledge to understand the way the humans and their local ecologies have relied on each other throughout history. and how that knowledge can help people adapt to the changing climate,
to heal and revitalize places that are severely damaged, and to heal minds by rebuilding connections to heritage and place. The Ark Re-imagined is a memory palace for knowledge that is on the verge of being lost. It's preserving, but it's also revitalizing. Iraq's waterways have been abandoned for decades due to conflict and war. But now, we've got a network of boat clubs beginning, and this can help to bring them back to life again. If this can happen in Iraq, it could happen anywhere. Endangered material cultures all over the world need arks, need oases to sustain them. Vernacular knowledge is a vast treasury that needs to be kept to hand for the future.